This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy to see if you could save when you bundle your home and auto policies. Try it at progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
Hey, quick heads up before we get rolling. If you're building something big and need a boost, papernapkinwisdom.com has a stack of free tools ready for you. Strategy, mindset, leadership, all there, totally free. You can even hit the link in bio on social media, and let's level up.
Welcome to Paper Napkin Wisdom, where we share pearls of wisdom shared by some of the world's top entrepreneurs, leaders, and difference makers. Here's your host, Govind Jayaraman.
Hi, I'm Govind Jayaraman, and this is Paper Napkin Wisdom, episode 273. If you've ever wondered how a single life-altering challenge can secretly hold the blueprint for your greatest impact, then today's conversation is about to open some powerful doors for you. Paper Napkin Wisdom is where we gather compact, handwritten insights of world-class entrepreneurs and leaders and transform them into actionable breakthroughs you can apply right now. In this episode, I'm sitting down with Jessica Fabus Cheng, registered nurse, surgical technologist, former Team USA Taekwondo athlete, and a relentless champion for digital accessibility who found her true voice only after nearly losing it forever. As you listen, notice how Jessica reframes adversity, how she turns limitation into leverage, how the smallest pivot in perspective can unleash a flood of possibility. Imagine what could shift in your world when you adopt the same mindset she reveals. Because when you change the frame, you change the game. So lean in, jot down the sparks of insight on your own napkin, and get ready to reflect on where your biggest obstacle might just be your next advantage. When an aha moment lands, snap a pic, tack hashtag Paper Napkin Wisdom, and let's create a ripple of wisdom together. Let's listen in. Jessica, welcome to Paper Napkin Wisdom. I'm excited to have you here today.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
So you have the distinction of a couple things on your paper napkin. First of all, it's absolutely beautiful. So if you're just listening to the podcast, make sure you get online and take a look at this beautiful napkin from Jessica. It's got a picture of a nice old school phone on it, and it's probably the first one that comes on a Cheesecake Factory napkin as well. So that's great. But the pearl of wisdom is your greatest, and there's an arrow from your to greatest challenge is your highest calling. And you've made the highest calling almost look like a superhero logo. So why did you share that with me?
I shared that with you because about 3 years ago, I sat in a doctor's office and I was actually diagnosed with a very rare form of thyroid cancer. And my treatment plan included a couple surgeries and then some radioactive iodine treatment later on. But the big kicker there was that he said to me, there is I don't want to say a high likelihood, but there was a very strong possibility that I would suffer vocal damage and that I may never speak again.
Wow.
Not just one surgery, but two. So it was really after the second one. And so that really put a lot of things in perspective for me, I'll say. It actually reminded me of all of the things I sort of didn't say. I mean, you just mentioned someone that had passed away suddenly. When things like that happen or you have some kind of diagnosis like this, that really puts things into perspective. And one of the big ones for me was, my daughter at that time was only 18 months old. And my voice was a big source of comfort for her. I thought about reading stories. I thought about, learning the ABCs, things that you just kind of take for granted. And it was really a gut punch, Of course, when faced with the decision of, is it your life or is it your voice? Of course, the choice is clear. but there's a lot of things that come along with that. And I decided then and there that this is not going to end the things that I did. I mean, I relied on my voice all the time. I was an instructor. I'm a surgical nurse. So I am an instructor in the field and in the classroom. So I need that voice. But I decided that if there is some way to get that voice back, I'm going to make that happen. So to loop back around, very long way of saying that what was a great challenge or the greatest challenge really became a call to action in my highest calling, I believe.
So, first of all, obviously we can hear your voice, and I'm sure there was a journey behind it.
Mhm.
But I want to go back to the beginning because I think that happens a lot for people when they're confronted with this.
Mhm.
This might never happen again, or never and always are dangerous words
Mhm.
because
Yeah.
always happen the way that is,
Mhm.
but may never speak again has this sort of like very
Mhm.
grave end to it. And again, you're a nurse, you're in the
Right.
medical community, so you understand maybe the risks of this, maybe
Yeah.
more intuitively or more instructively than others. So, how did that information hit you? What was the first reaction, and what did you do to get yourself sort of back online?
Well, I worked with a vocal coach. I decided to do that. It was about a year post the second surgery. Initially, right out of the gate, my voice would tire within 30 seconds. Like I would be,
What did that mean by tire, so people understand that?
so it would feel like I had been speaking for 8 hours straight.
Wow.
And you probably know this from being on a podcast too, if you're doing back to back calls, you're doing a lot of speaking, after a certain point, you start to notice that there's some vocal fray, like maybe it's just a little bit harder, you're feeling a little tired. So that would happen in a huge way in like 30 seconds. And so my voice would be here and it would just kind of go like that. And I would have to pull back and be quiet.
Mm.
So, you know, right now, I say I have 80% vocal function. So that's because I have learned how to better project, to use accessory muscles, to use parts like your head voice and parts, these vocal terms that I learned more in depth when I started working with a vocal coach. I'm able to access those better. So it took a lot of time for me to learn how to balance the when to pull back, when not to, when to project, when to limit. And it took a really long time. But the voice that you hear now, this is pure projection. Because if I
Mm.
were speaking without pushing my voice out, my voice would sound like my voice would sound like this, like lower. I mean, I'm doing that
Wow.
purposely, but it's much lower, natural in the natural state, I guess. So,
So there's an intentionality now
mhm,
to your
absolutely.
speaking, right? Like you
Yeah.
have to be more mindful of the fact, okay, I've got something to say now,
Mhm.
and I will project
Yeah.
in a certain way.
Mhm.
Did so so that's a physical part of it, but was there a psychological or mental part of it that maybe, to your point about it being your highest calling, that
Mhm.
made you better at speaking in some ways
Oh, yeah.
because you were more thoughtful about what you said?
Absolutely. It actually reminded me, I'm also an athlete. So back in 2010, I started martial arts. I started Taekwondo. And when I joined, I realized that okay, if I join this, I must go to black belt. I can't quit. I don't want to be that person that 2 weeks in is like, oh, it's too hard. I quit. Famous last words. And those are
Mm.
many other stories I have. But within 3 weeks of training, I severely injured my knee by doing some, like, I think it was a jumping roundhouse kick, like way out of my pay grade at the time, but I was just trying it. And I had that choice then to either quit, because I mean, only 2 weeks in, even though I said I wasn't going to do it, I had a good reason. But what I ended up doing and deciding was I'm going to focus in and hone in on the techniques And even if I'm just using my upper body to train, not or sitting in a chair, that mindset was really what got me to the next level. And because I was able to hone in and focus on the precision, ultimately, and 2 years later, I started competing and I started doing really well. And ultimately in 2017, I made the national team for the United States for in 2017 for a competition.
Wow.
But it was that focus and mindset really, because, it's easy to say, well, I have an injury now. I'm an adult, I can shelve this for now. I know maybe I'll come back to it. But that, again, I used that experience really as what drove me forward because I knew even when I had bad days that if I kept putting one foot in front of the next, figuratively, that I would make improvements, even if they were small.
So I think there's a lot to unpack there, but one of the things that I think is really interesting about it is this idea of this intentional movement, right? This idea of just take the next step forward and doing it even on a bad day. I think there are a lot of people out there that sometimes they start the day and it's not their day
Mhm.
and they kind of bail on the whole effort because their knee hurts, they can't
Yeah.
find their voice, and maybe that's a metaphor, they can't find their voice,
Mhm.
physically or metaphorically, they just don't have
Mhm.
the right words, they don't
Yeah.
understand what they could do.
Mhm.
But I think your point about the challenge being your highest calling and taking the step regardless is really important because people lack that tenacity sometimes.
Mhm. Yeah.
Did you always have that, or did that come from these opportunities? Did it grow?
I think a mix of both.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think we're born with certain innate qualities, some better than others. But when you are in those situations, you learn about your ability. And same thing for, being an OR nurse as well, because I didn't know if I would have the mental strength to be in an environment like that and be able to be calm. Um, it wasn't until I was in that position that I learned that, but I knew that I had focus. I knew I had drive. I knew I had determination and perseverance. And it's great because even something like the martial arts, being in the medical field, I mean, it's not just, you wake up one day and you're a doctor, you wake up one day and you're a black belt. No, you go through 14 belts and multiple years. You go through training over and over and over again. And that does create a level of discipline that you will aid you as you go along. But it really is truly, you need to put yourself out there sometimes to try and quote unquote fail to see
Yeah,
what works and what doesn't.
I think that's really fascinating. Um, the idea of giving it a shot is again is part of this progress. It feels like you're okay taking that step, not necessarily knowing what great looked like on the first one. Um,
Mhm.
and you say that that came from, partially it grew over time, and I think that's fair. But talk about the first time, again, you heard this, you may never speak again. You came out of the surgery, obviously, vocal cords very weak. What was that moment of resilience for you? Like, when did you just decide I was going to do this? Was this for your daughter, for yourself? What did that look like? What was the vision you had in your mind?
Well, it reminded me of, I mean, myself in moments where I didn't speak up about something or I had an idea and I didn't do it. Yes, I've done multiple things where I've put myself in the forefront, but there are other times too where doubt, I let it consume me. I pulled back. And in fact, growing up, God bless my mom, single mom, but I can distinctly remember there was this one time that we went to a grocery store. I think we were like shortchanged or something, couple bucks. I mean, nothing serious. No one did it on purpose. And she walked herself back from going back to the store to just say, hey, I think here's our receipt. I mean, you had proof. I watched her systematically over like 30 minutes find excuses why she wouldn't do it. And I mean, she's an amazing woman, but as a child to see that modeled. And then inside, I knew that I was very like, I am an action taker. I knew that from a young age. It was hard to see. And so I thought about that too. But now here I am with the possibility that my voice is going to be radically changed, or I won't be able to speak in the way I did before, or not at all. I mean, who knows what tomorrow brings, right?
Mm.
So it brought all those things back in for me and, just made me realize I needed to, maybe start to say those things and speak up. And that's why I say highest calling, because yes, calling, it's not finite done thing. This is I'm talking about my voice going downwards. It's about turning up the volume going upwards, even if it's just one little bar at a time. That makes sense.
I really, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I like how you went back to all the things you didn't say,
Mhm.
you reminded yourself of the doubt that consumed you.
Mhm.
And I'm going back to your napkin. You've drawn a picture of a phone, old school phone,
Mhm.
um, and I also, all the things you didn't say, and putting the phone there is all the conversations with important people that you didn't have. You
Right.
talked about your daughter, you just talked about your mother, and I
Mhm.
think that must have played a very big role in you wanting to bring your voice back, right? Because you wanted to have those conversations. You wanted to connect with those people. You wanted to share moments with those people,
Right.
right?
Yes. And I wanted, as we move forward, because we can only go forward, my daughter is now 5 years old. I am the role model for her. I
Mm.
am in the same position that my mom once was. And it's not about perfection, because we're all human, but I want to model for her what it's like to stand up or to speak up, even if it's a small thing. It doesn't have to be this giant, huge thing all the time. But when those giant, huge things come, that she has, you know what? I have the skill to do that. Because sometimes I think it boils down to it being a skill as well, because anything you practice, like, the muscle, it gets stronger. The same idea applies. So whether that applies to saying something I needed to say, or just making good on, a vision I had or an idea, I want her to see that her mommy is doing that. And then, of course, it will be a little bit different for her. She'll have her own journey, but then she can have that confidence that it's okay for me to speak up, even if people disagree with what I say.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And she's 5, right?
Mhm.
So obviously some of this is not part of her conscious self, but it's
Mhm.
got to make it's got to get across to her in some way, this determination, this idea of moving one step in front of each other regardless of the challenges.
Mhm.
I've got this image of you sitting in a chair practicing, taekwondo moves. Like that resilience can get modeled for other people, and you're
Yes.
doing that for your daughter. You're doing this for the people around you, I think,
Mhm.
and that's also part of this idea of the phone, this calling. You can
Mhm.
inspire others with what you are walking through.
Yes.
Um, Let me ask you, would this have all been worth it? I mean, your voice is 80%, right? Which
Yes.
means that probably you have to rest, probably you have to tend for your vocal cords. You probably have a self-care routine around it.
Mhm.
Um, Having gotten to 80%, was the effort worthwhile? Do you feel like, I mean, I think at one point people have this idea that I'm gonna be better than ever, or I'm gonna be back to
Yeah.
whatever.
Mhm.
You didn't quite get there. Was it still worth it?
Yes, absolutely. Because
Yeah.
as you were mentioning before, I mean, because of that training, it actually made my voice better, really more intentional with what I speak now. It's not, just, oh yeah, I could tell that person tomorrow. No, there's something that I want to say, it's that if not now, then when mentality, like why
Hey, Prime members! Are you tired of ads interfering with your favorite podcasts? Good news! With Amazon Music, you have access to the largest catalog of ad-free top podcasts included with your Prime membership. To start listening, download the Amazon Music app for free or go to amazon.com/ad-free podcasts. That's amazon.com/ad-free podcasts to catch up on the latest episodes without the ads.
Wait, why wait?
Yeah. And do you, so I think when people say, if not now, then whenever, then when, but I think also a lot of people confuse that with being harsh and brutal in their candor. And I think that you come across as being more grateful that you have this voice. So your calling is to connect. Your calling is to be with people. And that candor doesn't have to be harsh, right? It can be loving, but still be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree 100% with that.
Yeah. So tell me about how it's changed your instruction within your work as an OR nurse. I mean, that's a very vocal position. My brother's a surgeon, so I have a little bit of a view into that world. It's not a quiet room.
No, it is not. And you're also wearing a mask. So you kind of have to yell, and there's beeping things and a lot of
Urgency
stuff going on. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if sometimes there is yelling, you just you have to be really focused in that moment. But I don't know. Everything about what I do now is just intentional. And it's, I mean, again, it's not perfection. It's more about the intentionality of doing things. And there are moments where if you need to get your point across strongly, especially in the OR, you do have to sort of be very blatant, cut and dry. But the idea that, you can still go out there and connect without having to be the loudest voice in the room. Like my big thing too is, you don't have to have a perfect voice to make a powerful impact.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times success and forward movement, I don't want to say necessarily gets confused with perfection, but it's like there's these certain parameters that must be met for me to feel like I've progressed, when it might just be a little tiny thing that you did that actually moves you forward, and it's almost imperceptible at times.
So what does intentionality look like to you now? Like, give me a sense of, if you were to talk about your preparation before a podcast, before anything else, what does that look like?
Well, I'm looking at what my day looks like, so schedule is big, just so I know, okay, if I have a podcast here and then I have like a speaking engagement or something later in the day, there has to be a gap. Sometimes that isn't always possible. So having the ability for me to continue training my voice is also part of my preparation, even if I don't know when I may have to utilize that. So that's kind of, again, where that discipline comes into play. I would say my preparation is also mental, because if I know that I have, X amount of time, to speak. I mean, I'm really grateful actually that you mentioned how long the conversation may be. I mean, I could, looked at the Zoom thing too, but that's great. That's good for me to know, to have that information up front. And one of the big things for me too that, I need to mention is that this has deepened the passion that I have for creating a more accessible world for people of all abilities. Because when the doctor told me, you may not speak again, and knowing if you have, a family member who is a surgeon, from the medical field, I appreciate the reality check. I appreciate the candor. They were trying to do the right thing. It wasn't like, you will never speak again. It wasn't like a villain or something. It was just, hey, this could be your reality.
Yeah.
However, it didn't take into account that there are multiple ways to communicate. Even if my voice was softer, there's ASL, that was on the table. Am I going to be communicating in ASL? I don't have a problem with that. but that's another mode of communication. And I just felt like it was very final, like the way it was said. So I think there's more to uncover with those
Yeah,
type of things.
I think that's really interesting, right? I think we do a lot when we're looking at risk, right? And that's what was you're speaking of. You're speaking
Yeah.
back to the moment where the surgeon is talking to you about your surgery, your second surgery especially, and
Mhm.
saying to you these are the risks of surgery. And I think when we're assessing risk, sometimes we look at the the doors that could be closed as opposed to the other ways to navigate that same opportunity. For example, you may never speak again, but you will still have opportunities to communicate like this, and this, right?
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
right, like giving you you may never speak, but you'll not never communicate. I mean, those are
Right.
different
Right.
things, right?
Usually.
And um, and I think that goes back to this idea that you don't need to have a perfect voice
Mhm.
to communicate. And that's a part of this message that I think is overarching in what you're talking about. So there's a certain amount of personal grace that you have to give yourself along the way that you had to learn. Was that
Yeah.
harder to implement, or was that easier to do along the way? I mean, you talked about the doubt can sometimes be a barrier to giving yourself grace. So was that hard for you to learn to be gentle with yourself as you learned this?
Yes, because I have the framework from the past.
Mm,
Well, I used to sound like this. I could make this sound. In fact, I remember, so my family, we are raising a guide dog puppy right now with the Guide Dog Foundation that's here in New York.
mhm,
And every twice a month we go out like to like Home Depot, one of these places where they're learning to avoid distractions. And it's an awesome program. But I remember I was in an aisle and they were like, to get the dog's attention, you just make a really high pitched sound like this. And they demonstrated it. And I went to try it. And I couldn't do it. I didn't even know. And this is only like a couple months ago. So I'm still learning the limitations that I have. And I almost wanted to go into that place of embarrassment. Like, like, why wouldn't you, like, they were just kind of looking at me like, why can't you do this? Even though this is a guide dog for someone with a visual impairment, I mean, it's okay. But it was
right.
that knee jerk, like, oh, this isn't right. This isn't okay. The doubt comes in. Um, I could have explained myself, but, I just kind of tried to do it. And I probably would have used that as a teachable moment, speaking about like teaching and stuff. But um, yeah, I mean, I had to give myself grace in that unexpected moment. And that's big too. When you
Right.
can plan to have grace for yourself, like, okay, I'm going to go on stage for an hour. Like, yeah, there might be a few moments I need to drink some water, but that was just, hey, make this sound everyone makes to call a dog.
Mm,
And I just was very difficult.
yeah.
So there's that.
So that unexpected moment where you can't do
Hmm.
what you expect to be able to do,
Yes.
and or meet some expectation. I think there's a projection part of that, but there's another reality part of it. So how quickly did you catch yourself, and did I love that you're turning this into a real learning moment, because you did talk about you've got this passion for
Hmm.
championing accessibility,
Yeah.
uh, and you're sharing that story here. However, let's talk about the process of how you caught yourself and gave grace to yourself. You know, how long did that take? Is there something that you tell yourself in that moment? Because it doesn't sound you say you can't do that because of a limiting belief or a limiting thing. I think you
Hmm.
say you sort of it feels like you just sort of accepted that, saying you
Yes.
found some humor in that. Did I catch
Hmm.
that incorrectly?
No, that's correct. And I think the humor part is required. It's necessary. I mean, maybe it's not as funny in the moment, but then later on, it sort of becomes funny and it's just part of you. You
Yeah.
learn to accept yourself more and more, even with that small little example.
So let's I love the self-acceptance part of it. I love the way that you're talking about all of this. And I think it's really important for people to understand that you've evolved into a different way of doing things. A funny thing for me, though, as I'm thinking this through, as a father of three teenagers,
Mhm.
sometimes things get a little bit louder. Um,
Yes.
and and I wonder, have you? Is that something that you have to adjust around now too? That you can't project as loudly as you used to?
hmm Yeah, it is. So that's an opportunity for me to deepen my relationship with my daughter and use those moments where I could explain something to her. Like if she is having a meltdown or something, I'm less likely to try to take control. I mean, that sounds bad, but like I'm in control, but I'm not trying to micromanage how her reaction is to something
Mm,
because I know eventually she'll calm down and we'll have that talk.
yeah.
Actually, I got a great piece of advice from when I was training to be in the operating room. And someone, a surgical tech, he said to me, in 3 hours, this will be over. And it sounds kind of like simple, but it's like this chaos that's going on will stop. It will
Yeah.
stop. And then there'll be a quiet period or there'll be a time where it's over, whatever. And then that's when I would say maybe more effective communication can happen.
That's really interesting, because all things are going to be over. And that's
Yep.
also a reminder, going back to the second thing you said around you're reminded of all the things you didn't say. So this moment will be over. So
Mm-hmm.
make sure that you're in the moment. So
Yep.
it probably makes you more present in the moment more often. Would that be fair to say?
Absolutely. And that is challenging.
Yeah.
But even with all the intentionality in the world, I mean, you still have to reflect and slow down and do these, you know, self-growth opportunities that you have because we don't always want to do it, like,
Yeah.
but for me, it's been more of a requirement to be able to even sit here today and speak as long as I am. That's a result from the past. Um,
Yeah.
so
So how will you recharge after our time together?
it's going to be some quiet time,
Mhm.
probably some tea. I mean, I'm a huge coffee drinker, so I love iced coffee, especially. But even that, like I'm going to get in the car, I could go to Starbucks. That's a quiet time. And if the phone rings, usually I'll let it go and then I could text, another mode of
Yeah.
communication. It's just being more aware of my needs and coming from the medical field too, like even as a nurse, like we don't eat. It's, a lot of people in the field, they're so focused, they don't do the basic care necessities. So that's helped me too to realize that as well, that I need to schedule that in or just intentionally take that time for me.
Yeah, and I think that listen, if you're a leader listening to this, you may not have a challenge with your voice, but we
Mhm.
all have energy buckets, and as they become depleted, we have to be mindful of oscillating our energy back and forth and giving us that time so that when we are meeting our challenge, we
Mhm.
can do it with our highest and best self and meet that challenge and make it our highest calling, as you've done. Um, uh, at this point of the show, we always shout out our great friend John Rulin. John Rulin was a guest several years ago, actually 11 years ago, so more than several years ago, and he was a great supporter of our community. He shared with us a napkin. What you appreciate appreciates. It's a wonderful message that when you give gratitude and appreciation out to the world, the people to whom uh, you share that gratitude with also appreciate and value for themselves, for the community, and for the relationship. So he suddenly passed, unfortunately, coming up on 8 months ago, and we are asking all of our guests to shout out someone that they appreciate. Who would you like to shout out today?
I'll shout out my dad. He actually passed away last month
Sorry.
and that's okay. He was a musician and he taught me from a very young age the importance of a quality microphone. So I appreciate your mic. But I wanted to shout him out because he followed his dreams. He didn't let anything stop him. He left home at 17 to go on the road as a band member. And, he didn't know what the next step was going to be. He just knew that with enough focus and dedication and drive that something was going to happen. And so I go by that same motto, I may not have everything in front of me, but if you just go for what you want, listening to your heart and ensuring that you're not overworking, you can go far. So I'm just shouting him out because he was had that warrior spirit.
Yeah, I can see that in you.
Thanks
for joining me, Jess.
Thank you.
Jessica reminded us that the very thing that threatens to silence you can be the megaphone for your mission. As you allow her story to settle, you might begin to notice these breakthroughs echoing in your own mind. Transform obstacles into origin stories, because what once felt like a wall can quietly convert into a doorway. Speak with radical intentionality. Fewer words, higher impact, deeper trust. Drill resilience like a martial art. Daily reps compound into unshakable strength. Treat accessibility as a growth engine. When everyone can enter your market and your meaning expand. Raise up unheard voices. Making space for others amplifies the reach of us all. So take a small and slow breath. Imagine how even one of those ideas might reshape your next decision. A huge thanks goes to Jessica for sharing her courage, her expertise, and that powerful insight that we're all still picturing. If her journey moved you, let her know. Tag her on LinkedIn and tell her which moment landed hardest. Now, a gentle nudge. Subscribe so the next episode arrives right when you're ready for it. Rate and review because your words help fellow leaders find the show. Share your takeaway. Grab a napkin. Jot the spark that lit up for you, snap a pic, and post it with the hashtag #PaperNapkinWisdom. When you share, drop episode 273 in your share so Jessica can see the ripple she started. Because as you write, you may realize you're not just capturing a note, you're anchoring a new possibility. And that's exactly how small ideas on paper turn into big results in life. Until next time, keep your focus sharp, your alignment true, and most of all, act on the wisdom you carry. Make it a great day.